been a minute. I haven't talked to him since I stopped doing my syndicated show. He's California time, so this 5 to 9
Gig
time
doesn't
frame.
work out for a lot of people.
Yeah, but he's going to make an exception for us and be on tomorrow. We're going to have a lot to talk about because he, in this interview he did with Tucker Carlson, explained his support of Trump, the friends he lost in sort of conservative intellectual circles, and why he ultimately just recently left National Review after 20 years on Trump and the friends he lost. And he talked about this with us, too, one time, you may recall if you're an avid listener. And there were people who were, lost a lot of money, lost status when Trump got elected in conservative circles. They didn't like it because the sort of the establishment part of the Republican Party, the conservative establishment within the establishment of the Republican Party, Trump was disruptive to them and some of their very personal pecuniary interests as he was to others.
I didn't know much about Donald Trump. I wasn't a supporter of his in the primaries, but I knew he was going to win. I just knew it because he was saying things I could not believe. And, we're going to redo Youngstown, Ohio. And then he came to California. I talked to a bunch of farmers, and I said, well, did he come here? And did he have the straw in the mouth and the caterpillar cap? And did he have the hay? No. He had this black suit. It was 105 degrees, and he had a Queen's Act. So I said, in other words, he wasn't Hillary Clinton, or Joe Biden. Yeah. Put you all in chains he didn't change his act. I said he's authentic, and he's representing the middle class. So I thought he had a very good chance. But as far as your other question, yeah, I lost all of those friends. Really? I left National Review this year after 20 years, and I think they were happy to see me leave, too.
Why did he leave National Review?
And
why did you leave National Review?
Because there were certain issues that would pop up occasionally, and I could predict what the answer was going to be. The Covington kids, I just sensed that before we knew anything, people would come and condemn them. Or the Access Hollywood.
People at National Review condemned
because I think there were certain people in the Republican movement or establishment who felt it's their duty to internally police their own, and that's kind of a virtue signal to the left. We are just part of your class. We share the same values as you do, and we keep our crazies, and they're not empirical. You saw it on January 6th. I mean, we all condemn that buffoonish riot, but within 2 weeks, I said to myself, Ashley Babbitt was shot unarmed, and we don't know anything about the policeman. We don't know anything about the report. When a policeman shoots somebody who's unarmed, there's pictures everywhere.
Yeah, with no warning, by the way.
And then I thought, they're having Officer Sicknick lie in state, but I want to know where the evidence is that he was killed. He wasn't killed. He died of a stroke or some type of...
So National Review wasn't on that, huh?
No, and then there wasn't armed insurrection. There were no weapons found on the people who were arrested. They're not even being charged and tried with dispatch. They're sitting in purgatory. And so these issues I would get angry about, and I try to convey that anger, but I think they felt that I can't say they all, but I think a lot of them felt it was their duty as Republican establishmentarians to tell the world they didn't approve of Donald Trump's tweets or his crudity. And that was my message was always, but it's good for the middle class.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like a Shane or Magnificent Seven or High Noon. He's a gunslinger we hired. And we're the townspeople that are impotent, and he came in with certain skills, and he started to have success, and now we have the luxury of saying we don't like the fact that he has a 6-gun. Right. And then he's not, he has to ride off in the sunset. But there were other issues I think that they thought were more important, and so I think it was a good parting for both of us.
And Davis Hanson of VDH goes on to say, something that's an example of. The Trump thing is an example of something bigger that's at play here, the dynamic with those establishment conservatives that he's describing.
And it's more about a culture than it is an ideology. And the original Republican conservative movement, I thought, was going to be we're going to go back and look at the Constitution. When Jefferson said, it won't work if you pile up everybody in the cities because they'll be subject to mass hysterias, or you look at Tocqueville and certain ideas, I thought that's what we were. And I thought they would be champions of the middle class, but I don't think they were. I don't think they wanted to be.
For more on this, pleased to be joined by Michael Warren Davis, another deep thinker, contributor to the American Conservative, author of the soon-to-be-released The Reactionary Mind, MWD. Thanks for joining us. We'll see if we can get your named acronymed like VDH and branded accordingly. Michael Warren Davis, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, I was going to say the same thing. It's quite the intro. Victor Davis Hanson. We got someone else who's not him, but has a very similar name.
We could get VDH, but we got MWD. Yeah. No.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. So, what about VDH's description of his departure from National Review and the idea that they're more interested in sort of being part of the prevailing culture and cultural elite, is what he's really saying, as opposed to being, movement oriented for the interests of middle income Americans?
It's amazing because last week I published a post on my personal blog called The Grift Abides. And I was looking at this new National Conservatism Conference lineup of speakers, which is really cool. It's got, Daniel McCarthy and Austin Ruse and all these really stalwarts of patriotic nationalist conservatism. Some people like John O'Sullivan, who departed National Review long ago for very similar reasons, I guess, who have been on the front line for a long time. And then I'm scrolling down and I see Rich Lowry, the editor of National Review.
Yeah.
And I was horrified because, Rich, after the 2016 election, after talking about how Carly Fiorina cut Trump's, testicles off, things like that, he comes out with this book called The Case for Nationalism, saying that the right needs to get in line behind this idea of, a patriotic revolution. I said, who did you write that for, Rich, if not yourself? He was one of the main anti-Trump, anti-nationalist figures in the 2016 election. But because Trump won, he and National Review wanted to be part of the new sort of kind of pro-Trump establishment. So he published this book to kind of get his foot in the door. And VDH is absolutely right. I mean, he's never been a Trumpist, if that matters to anyone. He has done as much as he can to sort of signal his sympathies for Trump in a certain way, while also, yes, making. I love what he said about, Trump uses his, he's a hard man who uses violence to protect the people, and then we have the luxury of complaining that he uses a six-shooter, and that's exactly what happens. They would pay occasionally, maybe his policies are pretty good, maybe he has done a pretty good job of bringing jobs back to the United States. But his tweets are really, really mean and often very coarse. And that was for some reason that was supposed to be the takeaway.
Yeah, and we have Rich on the show. We just had him on the show last week, Rich Lowry, and talked to Jonah Goldberg and Kevin Williamson, David French, even back when he was at National Review, myriad times. And there's some there's obviously disagreements, and I like them less than I liked them before, but they're still smart, talented people. And it's okay to disagree amongst ourselves. I'm not afraid of that. But so the larger point is now, who is making sense in terms of charting the vision for the conservative movement and thus the freedom of this country going forward. That's really what VDH is getting at. And if he's got to suffer some loss of friends in pursuit of that, then so be it, and that's my attitude too. I think that's the right one. I want to get your reaction to someone else who I find interesting too, although I don't completely agree with him. But Michael Lind, who's down at UT, his book, The New Class War, is something people should pick up. In addition to your book, MWD, The Reactionary Mind, Michael Warren Davis's new book. Here's what he writes about the future of the Republican Party. If they want to be a national party, they have to avoid the mistakes of 2016 and other opportunities where they gained a majority only to fritter it away. He writes this: The Republican Party is set to blow its chance at a national party for the fourth time in 4 decades unless party elites finally deal with the incompatibility between the agenda that is being set by the anti-statist libertarian ideology of the party's donors, politicians, and policy wonks on the one hand, and on the other by the values and interests of the party's nationalist, communitarian, and populist voters who have no objection to government programs that hugely benefit them and their families. Do you think that's the fundamental question or issue that needs to be reconciled within the party if it's to be a majority party?
I love Michael Linden. I love that book. I got a copy as soon as it came out, and I really wasn't disappointed. I think he's basically right. Yeah, I think that the Trump movement, or I should say, sort of the core intellectuals in the Trump movement have made a mistake by kind of, and I guess this probably includes me too in a lot of my writing, by kind of constantly dogging on libertarians, because the fact of the matter is that you go to places, like rural New Hampshire where I live, even rural Massachusetts, a little down south, or to Texas or to Wyoming, and you're not getting a lot of big government types. They want the government to side with the American workers, especially when it's spent so long siding with the Chinese Communist Party. But at the same time, they're not pro-government. They still want, guns, God, and freedom. And that's something that's going to take a little bit more time to work out. I do think, and it's the one thing that gives me a little bit of pause about guys like, maybe like Josh Hawley, who brilliant guy, brilliant policy wonk, but I don't think quite appreciates the sort of the more government skeptic aspect of the Trump movement. Which President Trump himself always did.
Well, right, and there is, there's some conflicting positions that are being simultaneously held by people. There's a skeptic of big government, skeptic of the intelligence community, skeptic of what FBI has become as a law enforcement agency, skeptic of big government gambits, backdoor takeover of healthcare, and so forth, but supportive of a lot of other entitlement programs or supportive of protectionism. And again, you're not going to get unanimity of opinion on the full range of issues here, but sort of baseline is important. And I think you have to sort of get to first principles, if you will. Is government a force for good, or is government not a force for good? Is government just a blunt instrument and it needs to be restrained for the protection of our God-given rights? Or is it something that we want to be proactive really in any way that extends beyond the restraint for the purposes of equal protection of the law and the respect for the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution? And I think, so because once you start making exceptions about they can be proactive here and proactive there to my benefit, I like this transfer payment, I don't like that transfer payment, then you're, right back down the road to serfdom that we're on.
Well, I think that I have a chapter in my book about why, if we were actually on the road to serfdom, it wouldn't be such a bad thing. Serfdom was badly underrated. But I think you're right. The first principles are important. At the same time, I think that when we start to get into sort of the middle ground between first principles and public policy, which is where you start getting things like word communitarianism, which I suppose I'm a communitarian. I don't think it really means anything. I think that's where you start to muddy the waters. And I'll admit I am pro guns. Pro fireworks. Here in New Hampshire, that's a big issue for us. It's what distinguishes us from a lot of our neighbors. This and that. But since the government is kind of by necessity very involved in international trade, I'm a protectionist in the sense that I think that since the U.S. government has to be involved in any kind of international trade, it should be working for America's interests and not those of corporations or certainly not the Chinese government, which is what it has been doing for many, many years. So I think that, you and I aren't technically anarchists. We probably get pretty close at some points.
Minarchist.
I think insofar as we have a government, it should be a pro-American government.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, MWD, because that's your new nickname now. You wrote a great article about Thank God for Rednecks, and it's all about what's going on in Australia. And do you think that those apps that they have on their phone eventually are going to make their way to the States here?
I think that
at
they
least
could
some
very
of
well
them.
make their way to certain states.
Yeah, right.
But I don't. But I think that they will not make their way to places like Texas and Wyoming because of the Great American Hayseed, as I think they call them in the article.
But they really do. So they check that. If you don't check in, they come and find you. The police do, and this is, of course, all related to COVID.
Oh yeah, I guess that's the thing. There's an app that everyone I think South Australia is now required to download. But once they're under sort of this enforced quarantine, which we saw last year. And so what the government does is they will periodically they will ping your phone, and within 15 minutes you have to respond with like a selfie to prove where you are in the world. And if you're not at your home or your designated quarantine place, the app will contact a bureaucrat with the government's health department, and then that bureaucrat will contact the police, and they'll come around and check and make sure that you're home.
That is crazy stuff.
I wanted to get to your reaction to this in the context of American culture, because really the conversation about the Republican Party, too, is sort of focused on this, the divide over the college degree, the divide over protectionism. But there's also a divide between those who are faithful and those who are secular, and where to take the party in terms of respect for, for lack of a better description, Christian values. Expansion of Together project awarded $9 million. The National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. There's a guy named Tony Fauci who's the head of that agency you may have heard of. $9 million grant extension for the expansion of its Together study. The Together study aims to reduce HIV incidence by teaching relationship and sexual health promotion skills to young men who have sex with men. That's YMSM for those of you
okay.
updating your vocabulary in real time. YMSM, young men who have sex with men. That's a category now. Ages 16 to 24. A population disproportionately affected by HIV and so on and so forth. So you have government funding this program for what, at least in some extent, are pedophiles in a lot of states where the age of consent is older than the age of 17. They got a $9 million expansion of education program they're otherwise doing. And here again, what's the appetite for conservatives to talk about these moral issues, the issues that sort of define our culture in a much more profound way than does the marginal tax rate?
You know what? I was thinking about this just last night, because I was an undergrad when when the whole same-sex marriage thing was solved or not by Obergefell. So I wasn't really. I wasn't writing very much. I didn't really have much of a voice at that point. But when I started getting more into journalism, I looked back at some of the things that had been written at National Review. Some of it very good, some of it not. At the American Conservative, where I now write, again, some of it good and some of it not. And I realized that there was a lot of this tap dancing around the basic issue, which is the same-sex marriage question comes down to a question of do you think that the one man, one woman for life, raising children, model of the family, is that which society has to uphold, or isn't it? Is that our ideal, or is it not? If it's not, then marriage has no chance. If we don't believe that this faithful procreative union is something that's basically good for our society, not only for children but for just sort of the social fabric, the stability of our country. If we're not willing to take a stand for that in our legislation, then the rest of it's going to fall apart. In theory, there's absolutely, if you believe, as most of our friends on the left believe, that we have an absolute and unlimited right to have sex with whomever we like as long as it's consensual, then if this is what you believe, as the natural conclusion of the sexual revolution, then absolutely the government has the right to get involved and to make sure that the men, these de facto pedophiles, are safe in their pursuit of their desires. But this more, you're right. This is a more fundamental issue than a lot of people would like to realize. And until we're willing to sort of to revisit that lost cause and to fight for it again, to fight for the traditional family unit, one man, one woman for life, then we're not going to make any progress in that realm. We're just going to continue on with our slow defeat.
Michael Warren Davis, MWD, contributor to the American Conservative. Soon to be released is the book, The Reactionary Mind. Pick that up. Michael Warren Davis, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, folks. God bless.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Is your business in need of a reliable electrical contractor? With over 100 years of experience under our belts, Berry Electric has the skill you can count on. Our all-union labor-trained workforce is built to install and maintain all of your electrical needs. Berry Electric has worked vastly in industries across the board, including industrial, retail, commercial, and hospitals. Our 3 divisions of experienced and highly trained electricians are what your company needs. Power and light, maintenance, and low voltage are our specialties. Berry Electric is there when you need us.